Welcome to Medical Experts. I'm Taro, your host. My guest today is a Cleveland native who was once told he wasn't qualified enough for an athletic training position for Columbus Crew. But that didn't stop him. In fact, he celebrated with Columbus Crew as they won the MLS Cup in 2020. He may have started at the bottom as an assistant athletic trainer, but he worked his way up. And as of recent, he is now the head of sports science and medicine for Columbus Crew. I welcome you, Chris Shenberger. Chris, growing up, what sports did you play?
I actually played basketball, and then when I got into high school, I stopped playing basketball and I ran track and cross country. So I no soccer growing up.
So, where did the soccer connection come about to lead you to now working for an MLS professional team?
When I was in undergrad, Capital University in Columbus, Ohio, I sought out an opportunity to do an internship with a professional sports team, and it just so happened that at the time in Columbus, Ohio, it was Columbus Crew. That was it. So I had an opportunity to do an internship for a full season with the Columbus Crew at that time, and just really from there fell in love with the sport. Um, kind of made it a point to find a path that led me to get to work in soccer.
So, is Ohio home for you?
Yeah, it is actually. Funny
Oh,
enough, I think I'm probably one of the lucky ones that gets to chase my dream and do it at home. Um,
right.
I went to school, like I said, here in Columbus, Ohio. I met my wife in Columbus, so I'm actually from the Cleveland area.
Mhm.
My family's still up there, so just a couple hours north of here. But my wife is from the suburbs of Columbus. We actually, when we moved back, built a house in the town she grew up in, down the street from her parents and sister. So
Oh,
uh,
that's incredible. So when you're not working, what do you, your wife, your kid, what do you all enjoy doing?
we like to get outdoors, hike, things like that. Try and get around to some of the, like state parks and things like that to go for hikes.
Mhm.
I'm really into running, so when I've got time, get out and go for a run. But otherwise, yeah, we don't get a lot of time away. But when I do, try and spend it with my family.
I saw you enjoyed running marathons, but do you really have time to train for one now?
Since I started here in Columbus, I have not. Uh,
Uh,
prior to Columbus, I was at Northwestern University, worked with the men's soccer team there, but I tended to have more time to get out and go for long runs then. So
let's go back to your college days. At that time, what did you envision your career to be?
at the time, like I said, I had the opportunity to do that internship with the crew. Became passionate about soccer at that time, but I really didn't know where I was going to go from there. My wife and I got married right out of undergrad. So, for example, when we looked at grad schools, we looked at places that we could. She was an athletic training major as well.
Mhm.
We looked at places that we could both get into because we were married, and so I ended up in Atlanta, Georgia, at Georgia State University with a graduate assistantship at Emory University.
Mhm.
And just so happened that the head athletic trainer at Emory at the time had done a lot of work with U.S. Soccer, and she got me in with U.S. Soccer at that time. And so, starting in 2007, I started working with U.S. Soccer on a per diem basis, just kind of when I had time to get away for a week or two for a camp. But my first job out of grad school was at a Division III school in Cleveland, Case Western Reserve University. At that time, I was also teaching classes at Case. I
Mhm.
thought that was kind of the route I was going to go. And as I kind of grew in the profession, those first few years, I decided that teaching was not my passion. I really wanted to find an opportunity to work soccer full time because at Case Western, being a Division III school, I was one of three athletic trainers. So I worked football, basketball, baseball, everything. You kind of worked a little bit of everything. And so again, I kind of made it a point to find a job to work soccer full time, and was lucky enough to find an opportunity at Northwestern where they had previously had interns working men's soccer, and they had just opened up a position. This was 2012 going into
Mhm.
13, a position that was going to be full time with men's soccer. So I was actually the first full time individual there to work men's soccer.
I see. You mentioned how you were invited to help out with US Soccer as a per diem staff. What was your role?
I was just a per diem athletic trainer, and so I would send my schedule of availability. They would see what it matched up with in terms of youth national team camps. I would go, so I covered a wide range of both on the women's side and the men's side youth national teams.
Considering you had to be away for some time, how did that span out with your current job regarding to their flexibility with you being gone for those camps?
I was lucky enough, both at Emory and at Case Western. I had, leadership that was really behind the idea of me getting out and taking advantage of the opportunity and growing as a professional. And so, I didn't get to do it often, but typically, in the winter when we kind of had some downtime, and then obviously the summer when college is out of session and things like that, I was usually able to get away for anywhere from 2 to 3 camps a year.
When you were there, what was one of the biggest lessons you learned?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it was just the level at which these athletes compete at was something I had never seen before, and I think it really opened up my eyes to what we as medical and performance professionals can do to set up an athlete for success and to be able to perform at a very elite level.
With your wife also being an athletic trainer, how did you all balance life, work, hanging out with the kid, the dog? How did you do it?
She so funny enough, she's gotten out of athletic training. She learned early on in the profession it actually wasn't for her. So she took a little bit of a different path. Um, but I always tell people that her having an understanding of what we do has made it easier, I think, in our relationship for me to be away as much as I am because she understands what it takes.
Given that she understands, I imagine there are still aspects that can take a toll on your family. What were some of those challenges?
Yeah, it's I mean, obviously the hours can get pretty crazy. You can go long periods of time without a day away from this place. I think some of the hardest things currently that I deal with are just missing out, sometimes on some milestones for my son, missing a birthday, or he's getting into sports now. He's at the age where he's getting into a lot of different sports, so missing games and practices and things like that. But again, it's you have to take advantage of the time that you do have. You have to make that work life balance something that's important to you, and that was something that during my time at Northwestern, my mentor there preached that and he lived that. And so it's something that moving on into this role, sometimes it's a little bit harder, but I try and live that as well.
So, since the pandemic, are you still working the same amount of hours in the clinic, or do you get to spend a little bit more time away, whether that's at home or in your office?
Honestly, I tell people when they ask like what last year was like, I spent more time doing things I never thought I'd do in
Like
this
what?
profession, like scheduling nasal swabs. We had to test every other day, and then match day -1. So sometimes you'd go through 4 or 5 days consecutive within that, depending on when you had matches. I would say hours wise, I probably got pulled away from the athletic training room more than I would have in a normal year. When we went through periods where we had a couple instances where we had players get COVID and we were testing every day for 14 days and players weren't able to come into the facility. And so we were like makeshift putting tables out outside trying to get things done before training. Yeah, I mean, I would say the same amount of hours. It just kind of there were some hurdles we had to jump.
So, when they were in that bubble, you had to stay there, right? You able to go home
Yeah, no, we
considering you
were
live.
we were in Orlando for I want to say it ended up being like 29 days. It was hard trying to find time every day to FaceTime with my wife and my son on top.
Mhm.
Something I don't think any of us thought we'd experience. We had a positive COVID case with a player while we were down there. The first, that we had experienced, and I think I went 2 or 3 days where I got very little sleep trying to navigate
Wow.
the league protocols and how we were going to handle the rest of the team, and certainly very tricky. But the being away from home, I mean, it was a long period of time, but we're being in Columbus, Ohio. That's preseasons typically. This year it's pushed back a little bit, but typically end of January and February, so we don't get to do preseason in Columbus. We're typically going somewhere warm. So used to being away for typically a preseason 6 weeks long, you can count on being gone for about 5 of it.
Well, let's get right into it. MLS Cup champions in 2020, second time in club history. How did that victory feel?
Um, it's hard to put into words. The sacrifices that everybody within the club, but specifically the medical and performance department, the sacrifices that everybody made to get to that point and win a championship, kind of made it all seem worth it.
And
So,
what did some of those sacrifices look like?
again, we talked about kind of some of the differences with COVID in terms of we went through periods of the season where we literally had no facility access. So players were, it was like reminded me of youth soccer, like people, like literally players showing up and walking out on the field and training. And we're used to getting guys in the training room in the gym, an hour and a half to an hour before training starts so they can do prep and treatment. And so finding unique ways to prep without the ability to come in and use the facility, and testing every other day. And we went from typically road games where we would fly in the day before a match and have an entire day to prep, to we were flying into places like Houston and Dallas on the day of a match, 5 hours before the match, going to a hotel, hanging out, eating a pregame meal, and then playing a game. Something that we had never experienced before. Like, what does that even mean to fly in on the same day, get off a plane, and perform at an elite level? We were tasked with finding ways to make that work.
So, after that match, what was the celebration like within your medical team?
Yeah, it was a whirlwind. I mean, hugging, yelling, screaming, like, I mean, it was crazy, right? Like, but with COVID, like,
Oh, yeah.
constant, like, people are like throwing masks at you, and it was honestly like, again, it probably took me close to a month before it even like seemed real.
Wow. A whole month? How
Yeah,
come?
just I don't know, like you wake up and be like, man, did that like really happen? It just, I don't know.
So the next day, what'd you do? Did you kind of just chill at home or were you tasked
Um,
with some more
so we
responsibilities?
we actually, funny enough, you hear like these teams win championships, and they party all night long, and families are able to come down on the field or down on the court and be a part of it. Because of COVID, families weren't allowed to like come down on the field with us when we won after the,
Mhm.
and there wasn't really like a venue or anything to celebrate after the game. So we all kind of hung out in the locker room and celebrated as a team for a period of time after the game. What they ended up doing was the following day they had all of the staff and players, with their families, come back to the stadium, and we did kind of a whole trophy presentation and an opportunity for, like, I was able to go up with my wife and my son on the stage,
Nice.
pictures with the trophy and whatnot. So it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid, from what it typically would have been. It was
Cool.
a pretty cool opportunity. So
Do they
I'm gonna be
award
honest with you though, like I was like half asleep through the thing because I don't know if I would forget.
Do they award y'all rings as well or what's
Yeah, so we got a medal the day of, like after the game, they gave everybody medals and like championship shirts and hats and all that kind of stuff. And then yeah, I think they're actually going through the championship ring process right now.
nice?
So
That's
we'll get
awesome.
those at some point, which would be pretty cool.
Awesome. So a victory is very nice, but I imagine there is some stress being a part of a team in such a game that means so much. What is the toughest aspect about being an athletic trainer during that kind of match?
So much stress, like anytime you see a guy go down, like, is he going to get back up? Am I, the hardest part of our job is I always say, we're always the people that give the bad news, right? I never go to the coach with good news very, very infrequently, right? It's always to tell them that somebody can't go, or somebody needs to get subbed out, or, somebody's not going to be there today because they're sick, something like that. And so, during a game like that, right? Like it's just, I think it kind of heightens all those senses. Am I going to have to, tell the coach we got to sub out, one of our best players or something? We funny enough, two of our best players got COVID the Wednesday and Thursday before the final. So we were without two of our best players in the match. So I think at that point I was kind of like numb to anything else bad
Hmm.
happening because I was pretty certain that nothing else worse could happen.
Yeah. So you said you're the bearer of bad news. So have you ever had a circumstance in general where maybe a staff on the team came off with a response that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, no, I think you always have challenges, right? With coaches when you're telling them that a player can't play or something like that. I think what I've learned over time is you have to learn the individual that you're communicating with and find the best way to give them that information and that news. And for me, I know they're not going to be happy, right? So I know that sometimes their reaction is going to be to disagree or want to argue, but I'm okay with that. I know ultimately that I'm in it because I've got the players' health and safety is the top priority, right? And so when I have a disagreement, we talk through it and we come to a conclusion that benefits everybody. But again, it's always going into it with the players' health and safety.
Okay. So during your early years as an athletic trainer, what was it like having to go out on the field to address like a very scary injury? Like what was going through your mind?
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird. Like you always wonder, like, what are you going to do in a high stress situation with a medical emergency or a more significant injury. For me, it's like one of those things that it just kind of comes to you as you're going through the process and you're evaluating the injury. All of the things that you learned, through school or through previous experiences, they just kind of happens. For me, it's about kind of channeling my thoughts and my process into what's going on and not letting outside things or other people around be a distraction to me.
So you're telling me when you were a new athletic trainer, you were pretty composed having to run out on the field for a
Yeah,
major
I think
injury?
I think part of that was one, the experiences that I've had, but two, the level, and not to say like Division 3 athletics are those athletes are just as important as a a professional athlete, but there's a little bit less pressure on you in those instances. The pressure level of being in an MLS game and you only have three subs and you've got people, fans yelling things at you is a little bit different than maybe a Division 3 game where you have, you can make a substitution if you have to and take more time to evaluate an injury before making a decision on whether or not they can, go back in and play.
Mhm. What would you tell an athletic trainer who hopes to work for an MLS team regarding to maybe starting at a lower level to gain the experience and confidence?
Yeah, sure. I think any experience you have, you're gonna take that with you, right? And what I mean by that is every place I've been, whether it was grad school or my first job at Case Western or Northwestern, I walked away from it and I took experiences that I was like, okay, this is really good. This is something I'm going to use or do again in the future. There were also things, or people that I came across where I'm like, you know what, that's maybe not necessarily something that I'm going to do. I don't like the way that happened, but you're gonna build yourself through all the experiences you have. And so, for me, there's a lot of people in this profession that are going to say that it's a roadblock for you to be at maybe a smaller school with an aspiration to get to a larger school or to professional soccer. But you just have to keep working hard. You have to network with the right people, and eventually, that there's opportunities out there.
Hmm. And everyone may see Chris as, oh, the athletic trainer that got an MLS champion, but you also started off as an assistant athletic trainer for this club. How did that come about?
So funny enough, I applied for a head athletic trainer job when I started with the club, and was actually told initially by the hiring committee that I didn't have enough experience to be a head athletic trainer in this league, and I was a little bit taken back by it because in my eyes I thought, I know I do. I do have the right experience, and it just so happened that the club reached back out to me about my interest in being an assistant athletic trainer at the club, And so obviously I ended up getting that role. And I just said to myself, you know what, I still want to be a head athletic trainer in this league. I absorbed as much as I could in that first year, not knowing that the very next year I'd have an opportunity to get a promotion to head athletic trainer. But that first year, I went into it knowing I was an assistant, but with the idea that I still wanted to be a head of this league. And so I went into it and absorbed as much as I could. And if I could say one thing, as much as I thought I was ready to be a head athletic trainer in this league, having a year as an assistant and just learning the inner workings of the league was really helpful, because at the end of that year, the head athletic trainer left for an opportunity with another club, and I was given the opportunity. I was promoted to head athletic trainer after just 1 year.
What was something surprising that you learned as an assistant athletic trainer?
Gosh, there was a ton of stuff, but I would again say I don't think I'd ever been anywhere where athletes put so much time and effort into taking care of their bodies. A staff of two, when I went into it, a staff of two athletic trainers. Now we actually have three, working with 30 athletes. When I initially thought about that, I'm like, oh, that's going to be so easy. Like, I came from places where I was one athletic trainer working with 100 athletes, but I quickly learned that the time and effort these guys put into taking care of their bodies, two is not enough, which is part of the reason that the MLS within the last year has mandated that all the teams have 3 athletic trainers on staff.
And given the MLS season can be quite long and can get a little arduous during that mid part where you're really still trying to make the push, knowing how much time the athletes put in, how does that inspire you to keep coming into work, giving your A game?
You're around these guys so much, you develop relationships with them, and to see what they go through, it's fun for me to come in every day and see these guys and push them to be better. Obviously, not every year you're gonna win a championship, but seeing the end result of last year kind of makes you realize the time and effort that you put into it can come with some pretty cool results.
And now that you are the full athletic trainer, how does your job role now differ compared to working as the assistant athletic trainer?
Just a lot more, I would say, administrative responsibility. I'm the direct communication to the coaches. I'm the direct communication to the technical director and general manager. When I was the assistant, I could pretty easily go home at the end of the day and get away from work. Sometimes that's a little bit harder now.
I see.
And I actually, funny enough, transitioning into a new role within the club now, where I'm going to be the head of sports science and medicine, which will become much more administrative, and we'll have 3 athletic trainers ahead, 2 assistants, and then myself. So we'll end up with 4 athletic trainers on our staff.
So does that mean you won't be doing as much on-field work?
Yeah, so I won't do as much on field anymore, but I will now oversee what we would call our high performance department now. So within that's the medical team, strength and conditioning, dietitian, our fitness coach, data analyst, all of that kind of your sports performance umbrella.
So would that give you the opportunity to stay in your hometown when the team is away, or are you still traveling with the team?
I'll still travel in some capacity, but yes, it does. For me, it was a really cool move, because it's going to give me the opportunity to not have to travel as much, and hopefully spend some more time with family, because it's on average, you can, in a normal MLS season, you can account for about 2 weekends a month you're on the road traveling.
If we weren't in a pandemic and you had a day or a week off, what would a relaxing day be like for you and your family?
Vacation. We're big Outer Banks, North Carolina people, so I just like to get away and disconnect. Honestly, I don't need anything crazy, flashy for me. I just, it can get kind of so high strung and stressful during the year that when I get some time away, I just like to disconnect, try and get away from my phone and focus on the family as much as I can.
Now, for a student who is currently in university, what are some things they can do to start to get exposure if they know they want to work for a soccer team, whether that's college or professional?
Yeah, I look for experiences. There's so many opportunities out there. for example, in Columbus, we've got typically 2 student intern positions that we fill every year through local universities that have athletic training programs. But I would say that's probably the biggest thing is to look for experiences. If you're, geographically in an area that's got an MLS team or a USL team or NWSL team, something like that, like reach out to those staffs. There's so many of us that are looking to give students opportunities, right? Like I never would have gotten to where I'm at without that opportunity. And I love to be able to give those opportunities to students, and coming out of school, again, there's so many like internship opportunities. You just have to, again, look out for them.
And when they do get that opportunity, what are some things they should be observant of as they're in their internship to really grow and learn as much as they can during their time?
Take it all in, ask questions. I always tell our interns, like, you can sit back in the corner and not ask questions and not get your hands dirty, and you're going to get what you get out of the experience. But the ones that are the most successful for me are the ones that come in and they're not afraid to ask questions. They're not afraid to get in and help out with the treatment. You're ultimately you're going to get from the experience what you put into it.
Looking back, what's been the best advice you've been given?
Probably pretty simple, just to not stop chasing my dreams. I told you early on, kind of my first soccer experience in undergrad and becoming passionate about the sport. And I think I, probably pretty easily could have just said, you know what, I'm working at a Division III school. It's going to be so hard to get to that level. But I didn't. I kept that passion alive through U.S. soccer. I, built relationships with people whom I thought, ultimately could help me get to where I wanted to be.
So what do you hope to still accomplish?
Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, for me here, just building a championship performance team. We could easily get complacent, especially with winning a championship last year. But for me, it's a drive to be even better and build a culture here that's kind of on the brink of what's next in terms of medical and performance. There's so many technologies out there and so many new innovations, and I really want to build something here that's kind of at the front end of that, and that other medical and performance departments look at and say, man, we want to be like the Columbus Crew.
Great. Awesome. That was wonderful, Chris. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out. So